Imagine the joy of expecting a new addition to your family, the excitement of preparing for a little one, and the shared happiness of new parents. This is how Allison and Adam felt when they discovered they were having triplets. Their story started with dreams and anticipation, filled with love and commitment. Adam was by Allison's side every step of the way, from prenatal visits to baby showers, their bond growing stronger as they prepared for their new life together. But life had other plans. Amidst their bliss, an unexpected twist of fate left Allison to face motherhood alone, abandoned with newborn triplets. Years later, fate brings Allison and Adam face to face again. What happens when their paths cross once more? Join us as we journey through a roller coaster of emotions, from the highs of joyful beginnings to the lows of unforeseen challenges, and back to moments of hope and reconnection. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. In a heart-wrenching turn of events, a man chose to abandon his wife, leaving her to face the daunting challenge of raising newborn triplets alone. Years later, fate orchestrated an unexpected reunion between them, a twist that no one could have predicted. Allison and Adam, who had been married for only a brief 2 weeks, were overwhelmed with elation upon learning that Allison was pregnant. Their lives, still new and fresh with the excitement of marriage, were suddenly filled with the promise of a growing family. Their hearts danced with joy, and they eagerly anticipated the day they would welcome their child into the world. Throughout Allison's pregnancy, Adam's support was unwavering and profound. He stood as a constant source of strength and encouragement, attending every prenatal appointment with her and demonstrating his deep dedication to her well-being and their future together. Each visit to the doctor was a moment of shared hope and anticipation. During one particularly routine checkup, the doctor's encouraging words about the baby's health brought a sense of relief and joy to both Allison and Adam. As they gazed at the monitor, Adam's loving touch on Allison's hair was a gentle reminder of his steadfast presence and his excitement for the life they were about to create. Allison felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, deeply appreciative of Adam's involvement and the way he eagerly participated in their preparations for their baby's arrival. Together, they transformed a spare room into a warm, welcoming nursery, selecting every piece of furniture and every tiny garment with meticulous care and boundless love. As Allison reached the 28-week milestone, she celebrated the approaching arrival of her child with a joyous baby shower, surrounded by her closest friends. The air was filled with laughter, heartfelt conversations, and the exchange of thoughtful gifts. Yet, amidst this sea of happiness, Allison was suddenly struck by sharp, intense contractions that took her breath away. "Ouch!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling as she clutched her rounded belly, her face etched with a mix of pain and urgency. Alarmed by her sudden distress, her friends rallied around her, their faces a mix of concern and empathy. "What's happening? Are you all right?" one friend asked, her voice laced with worry. With great effort and gritted teeth, Allison managed to respond, "I'm experiencing very strong contractions. We need to get to the hospital right away. Please, I need your help to get there." "Of course, I'll call Adam immediately and let him know what's going on," Maya, a close friend, assured her as she helped Allison to her feet with gentle urgency. Upon their arrival at the hospital, the medical team quickly confirmed that Allison was indeed in labor. The intensity of the moment was palpable as Adam arrived, his anxiety and excitement mingling as they prepared for the birth. To everyone's amazement and delight, the first baby to emerge into the world was a girl. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, her voice filled with surprise and confusion. Adam, holding Allison's hand tightly, was taken aback. "How is this possible? The ultrasound indicated a boy. Don't you remember our conversation at the cafe? We had both hoped and wished for a daughter," he said, his voice laced with bewilderment. Allison, her face a mixture of pain and hope, nodded in agreement. "But wait," the doctor interrupted, her voice shifting to one of encouragement. "I see another head. We're not finished yet." With renewed determination, Allison continued to push, her strength and resolve evident. Moments later, the doctor triumphantly announced, "It's a boy. Look, here he is. The room erupted in joy and relief as Allison and Adam welcomed not just one, but two healthy babies into their lives, their hearts brimming with love and astonishment at this beautiful turn of events. Before Allison could fully grasp the unfolding situation, another agonizing scream tore from her lips as yet another baby began to make her entrance into the world. Adam stood in stunned disbelief. They had anticipated the arrival of only one child, but now, in a whirlwind of unexpected events, they faced the daunting reality of caring for three fragile newborns. The overwhelming responsibility of raising triplets, born prematurely at just 28 weeks, was now their new reality. Allison was swiftly transported to the recovery room, while the three tiny babies, whom Allison named Andy, Amara, and Ashton, were admitted to the neonatal intensive care unit, where they would remain for several days to gain strength before they could safely come home. As Allison rested and recovered, Adam found himself consumed by a mixture of confusion and anxiety. Desperate for answers, he approached Allison's doctor, his voice tinged with frustration and bewilderment. "How could this happen? How did we not know there were triplets?" he asked, his eyes searching for clarity. The doctor, with a look of understanding, explained, "Sometimes ultrasounds can miss detecting everything, especially with such small and closely packed fetuses. They might also conceal themselves from view or overlap with one another, making it challenging to identify all of them. You're incredibly fortunate. Such cases are exceptionally rare, only 1 in a million pregnancies." Far from feeling elated, Adam was overwhelmed by a profound sense of discouragement. The daunting prospect of raising 3 newborns simultaneously was far from the joy he had envisioned. While Allison and their newborns remained in the hospital, Adam chose to retreat to the familiarity of their home. Before leaving, he told Allison, "Just let me know when you're ready to come home." The following 5 days passed in a blur of hospital routines and anxious waiting. When Allison and her babies were finally discharged, she hoped to see a glimmer of joy and relief from Adam. Instead, their return was marked by an uneasy silence. "Is everything all right?" Allison inquired, sensing his distant demeanor. Adam's only response was a noncommittal shrug and a low grunt. Once they arrived back home, Adam's first question was about the immediate needs of the babies. Allison, still hopeful that he was beginning to adjust to the overwhelming demands of parenting triplets, responded with a smile. "The babies ran out of diapers while we were at the hospital. Could you please pick some up from the store?" she requested, her tone filled with expectation. Adam nodded absently, "Sure, I'll be back soon," before stepping out of the house. Alone now, Allison eagerly attended to the care of her 3 precious babies. This was her first opportunity to care for them without the constant presence of hospital staff. As she gently placed them into their crib, she whispered soothingly, "Hello, my dear little ones. Daddy went out to get more diapers, so just be patient for a little while longer. Let's keep things tidy for now, okay? No messy surprises just yet," she murmured, her voice filled with love and hope. As the gentle silence of the night enveloped their home and the children drifted into a peaceful slumber, Allison hesitantly began to prepare dinner, her heart weighed down by uncertainty. She chose a simple macaroni and cheese dish, a comforting meal that she hoped would be ready by the time Adam returned. But as the minutes turned into hours, the once warm hope of his arrival began to wane, leaving her alone with growing unease. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered as the triplets woke up, their cries piercing through the stillness all at once, drowning Allison in a wave of helplessness. She felt her strength falter, unable to comfort them all simultaneously. Desperation clawed at her as she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Adam's number. But each attempt met with silence, the call going straight to voicemail. "Adam, where are you? Please tell me you're okay. I'm really scared. Please, just call me back," she whispered, her voice trembling as she left a message, her mind spiraling into darker thoughts. The seconds dragged on, turning into agonizing minutes, and still, there was no word from Adam. With each tick of the clock, her anxiety grew unbearable, suffocating her in a blanket of dread. Frantically, she dialed his number again, only to be met with the cold, unyielding silence of a phone now turned off. The fear that had been simmering in her chest now erupted into full-blown panic, and with shaking hands, she called 911, her voice cracking as she pleaded for help. "Please, I need to know if my husband's phone is still active. He's missing, and I'm terrified something has happened to him," she choked out, her words laced with fear. The operator's response offered little solace. "His line is active, ma'am. There hasn't been an accident, and he's currently on the interstate." Relief was elusive as Allison felt her heart shatter into pieces. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the cries of her children, as she sobbed uncontrollably. "Why is this happening? What have I done to deserve this?" she cried out, her voice filled with anguish and confusion, the weight of her reality crushing her spirit. Alone in the dim light of her home, surrounded by the echoes of her children's cries, Allison felt the walls closing in on her. The despair was suffocating, and the fear of the unknown gnawed at her soul. Before succumbing entirely to hopelessness, she clung to the last thread of hope. Greg, Adam's closest friend. Perhaps he held the answers that could ease her torment. As dawn broke, Allison, weary and broken, found herself at Greg's doorstep, her heart heavy with both fear and anticipation. The bond between Adam and Greg had always been unbreakable, and now, in her moment of desperation, she prayed that Greg could shed light on the darkness that had suddenly consumed her life. In a heartbeat, her world had been turned upside down, and she was left grasping for any glimmer of understanding amid her spiraling despair. "Hey, Allison, come on in. It's been too long," Greg greeted warmly, his smile faltering slightly as he noticed the tension etched on her face. He stepped aside to let her in, sensing the gravity of her visit. "Can I get you some coffee?" he offered, trying to ease the obvious unease between them. Allison nodded, grateful for the small comfort, though her heart was pounding in her chest, desperate for the answers she had come seeking. As Greg placed the steaming cup on the table, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I know Adam's behavior has been difficult to understand lately," he began, his voice tinged with concern. Allison cut him off, unable to suppress the urgency in her voice. "Greg, please just tell me. Did you see him after he left? Did you talk to him?" Her voice wavered with the weight of the unknown. Greg sighed, meeting her anxious gaze. "Yes, Allison, I saw him. We even argued about it," he admitted, his words hanging in the air, heavy with implication. He could see the color drain from Allison's face as she absorbed his confession, her anxiety deepening with every passing second. "I tried, Allison, I did. I told him what he was doing was wrong. I begged him to stay, to be there for you and the babies, but..." Greg's voice trailed off, his expression pained. "He wouldn't listen. He was so stubborn." The revelation was a dagger to Allison's heart, each word twisting the blade deeper. The man she thought she knew, the man she loved, was slipping further away from her, and Greg's words only confirmed her worst fears. "Is that all?" He didn't say anything else. Allison's voice cracked, her desperation palpable. Greg could feel the disappointment radiating from her, the hope she clung to slowly slipping through her fingers. He knew he had to say more, even if it meant shattering her illusions further. "Allison," Greg began softly, leaning forward as if the closeness could somehow lessen the blow. "I think there's more about your relationship with Adam that you need to understand." His words hung in the air, a quiet bombshell waiting to detonate. Allison's brow furrowed in confusion. What more could there be? She had always believed that Greg knew everything about her relationship with Adam. "What are you talking about, Greg? I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. Greg looked at her with a solemn expression, one that carried the weight of knowledge he wished he didn't have to share. "Do you remember the first time you met Adam?" he asked gently. Allison's eyes filled with tears, her mind drifting back to that day as if it were only yesterday. "Of course I do," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It was a Friday. I was working at the cafe, and I saw you two sitting with a group of guys. Maybe they were your friends." It was someone's birthday, I think. I still remember Adam's loud laughter as he raised his glass when the guy cut his cake. The memory was bittersweet, a stark contrast to the sorrow she now felt. Greg nodded, his expression unreadable. There's something about that day, something about Adam, that you might not know. And I think it's time you heard it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The room seemed to close in around them, the air thick with anticipation as Allison braced herself for whatever truth Greg was about to reveal. Yes, we were celebrating Sam's birthday that day, but there's something you don't know, Greg began, his tone somber. Allison's tears flowed freely as she remembered how Adam had stared at her across the room that first night. It was a memory she had cherished, one that now felt tainted. Greg's voice pulled her back to the present. Both Adam and Sam were interested in you, he continued, his words cutting through her like a knife. They were drunk, and it turned into a competition. Who could win you over first? But it didn't stop there. They made a serious bet. A bet? What kind of bet? Allison's heart pounded in her chest, dread pooling in her stomach. Greg hesitated, the weight of his next words hanging heavily between them. He knew that revealing the truth would hurt her, but there was no turning back now. Allison, Greg began slowly, his voice heavy with regret. Adam bet $1,000 that he could sleep with you that night. He paused, watching the shock register on her face. Sam thought it was an easy bet and even upped the ante. He offered Adam $5,000 if he could court you and date you for a month. Allison's world seemed to tilt off its axis. She stared at Greg in disbelief, her voice barely a whisper as she asked, "He made a bet and slept with me? How could he do that?" The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing down as the enormity of the betrayal sank in. But Greg wasn't finished. He knew he had to tell her everything, no matter how much it hurt. "Allison, there's more," he said, trying to steady his own emotions as he revealed the darker side of his friend. Adam had never been in a serious relationship before. To us, it seemed like some kind of tasteless joke. But then, he took it seriously. "So, he courted me and married me just for $5,000? Allison's voice trembled, her tears blurring her vision. The idea that her marriage could have been built on such a cruel game was unbearable. But Greg shook his head, trying to offer some solace. "No, Allison, that's not it at all. He did like you. Honestly," Greg insisted, leaning forward, trying to convey the sincerity in his voice. "But things changed after you started dating. When you got married, it seemed like everything was going well. But then Adam began to feel trapped. He was scared of commitment, of settling down too soon. That's when he started pulling away, and he had those affairs." Affairs? Allison's voice was a broken whisper, each word laden with disbelief and pain. Adam had affairs? The realization hit her like a ton of bricks, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Greg nodded, his face etched with sorrow. "Yes, Allison. Adam found it easy to deceive you, to keep you in the dark. He was terrified of the life he had chosen, of the permanence of it all. At one point, he even talked about divorcing you, but he was too scared to follow through." Allison felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. Everything she thought she knew about her husband and her marriage was crumbling before her eyes. The man she had loved, the father of her children, had played with her heart, used her for a bet, and then betrayed her with other women. The weight of the truth was suffocating, and she could barely breathe as the reality of her situation settled over her like a dark cloud. "If he wanted to divorce me, why did he stay? Why didn't he leave me earlier?" Allison's voice trembled, her words barely escaping through her sobs. The thought that Adam had stayed only to eventually abandon her cut deeper than she could have imagined. Greg sighed, searching for the right words to explain the turmoil that had consumed Adam. "Allison, I can't say for sure why he stayed as long as he did," Greg began, his voice filled with sympathy. "But I do know that your pregnancy changed everything for him. He wasn't ready for the responsibility that came with it, but he tried to keep it together for your sake. He didn't want to hurt you, so he stayed, even though he was struggling. But when you gave birth to the triplets, it was like he reached his breaking point. The reality of having 3 babies to care for was too much for him to handle. He felt trapped, overwhelmed, and in his mind, running away seemed like the only escape. "Oh my God, Greg," Allison sobbed, her heart shattering all over again. "You've been visiting us regularly. You could have told me this sooner. Adam left me alone with the babies. How am I supposed to survive without him? What do I do now?" The weight of her new reality pressed down on her, suffocating her with fear and uncertainty. The thought of raising 3 children on her own, with all the challenges that lay ahead, was terrifying. Her head pounded with the pain of hours of crying. Yet the tears kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. She began pacing Greg's living room, frantically trying to call Adam, but his phone remained off, a symbol of his absence and the finality of his departure. "Allison, please try to calm down," Greg urged gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You need to take a breath and have some water. Just give me 5 minutes, and I'll take you home." He could see that she was on the verge of collapsing from the emotional and physical exhaustion. Greg drove Allison home in silence, the tension thick in the air. When they arrived, Allison thanked the neighbor who had been watching her triplets, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She quickly dismissed the woman, wanting nothing more than to retreat into the privacy of her home. Greg followed her inside, his heart heavy with concern. "They're beautiful, Allison," Greg said softly, his voice filled with genuine affection as he gently stroked the heads of each of the babies. "Adam should have stayed, at least for them. They deserve to have their father in their lives." His words, though meant to comfort, only deepened the ache in Allison's heart. She knew he was right, her children deserved better than this. After Greg left, Allison tried to gather herself, focusing on the immediate needs of her babies. She nursed them, the simple act of feeding them grounding her in the present moment, even as her mind raced with fear and sorrow. Once they were settled in their cribs, she felt the exhaustion wash over her, too weary even to cry anymore. She collapsed beside them, her body and soul utterly drained. As the minutes turned into hours, the overwhelming weight of her situation finally pulled her into a restless sleep, the only solace she could find amid her heartbreak. The next morning, Allison was jolted awake by the piercing sound of the doorbell. Her heart leaped in her chest as she scrambled out of bed, hope surging through her. "Adam?" she called out, rushing to the door, her pulse quickening with anticipation. But as she opened it, her heart sank. "Greg," she breathed, the disappointment heavy in her voice, the hope that had briefly flickered inside her extinguished. Greg offered a sympathetic smile, sensing her letdown. "I tried calling, but you didn't pick up," he said gently as he stepped inside, his arms laden with a large bag of diapers and other baby supplies. "Wait here, I've got more in the car." Allison stood there, stunned by his unexpected visit and the thoughtfulness behind it. She hadn't expected Greg to show up, let alone with everything she desperately needed for the babies. "Do you want some coffee?" she asked, feeling a sudden wave of gratitude. But Greg shook his head, already turning back toward the door. "No thanks, I have to get going, but maybe another time." As Greg left to retrieve more supplies, Allison couldn't help but feel a small measure of relief wash over her. She had been drowning under the weight of caring for 3 newborns alone, and her reserves of diapers and other essentials had been running dangerously low. Those first few days after Adam left were a blur of exhaustion and anxiety, but something shifted when Greg began visiting more frequently, offering his steady hand of support. Little by little, Allison came to realize just how much she relied on Greg. The overwhelming responsibility of raising her children alone was more than she could bear, and Greg's presence was like a lifeline pulling her from the depths. He went above and beyond to ensure that she could keep moving forward and that her focus could shift from mere survival to contemplating a future. Greg even offered to watch the triplets while she went on job interviews, an offer that proved invaluable when Allison landed a position as a lawyer at a private law firm. Her days quickly became a balancing act between the demands of her new job and the ceaseless needs of her children. But knowing Greg was there provided her with a crucial sense of stability. At first, Allison resisted the growing bond between Greg and her children, feeling a mix of guilt and fear that she was somehow betraying Adam. But as time passed, she couldn't ignore the calm that Greg brought to their lives. He had a way of soothing the triplets with his gentle care and attention, something that Allison had struggled to maintain on her own. Slowly but surely, Andy, Amara, and Ashton became attached to Greg, their little faces lighting up whenever he walked through the door. The change in the household was palpable. The children no longer pestered Allison to take them to amusement parks on weekends, nor did they quarrel over not receiving extravagant gifts during the holidays. Instead, they were content and happy, their hearts full with the simple, loving presence of Greg in their lives. And as much as Allison had fought against it, she began to see Greg not just as a friend, but as the anchor that had helped her weather the storm of Adam's abandonment. Greg naturally took on the role of a father figure, immersing himself in the lives of the children with genuine love and care. His unwavering dedication gradually melted the walls around Allison's heart, and she found herself developing deep feelings for him. They started dating cautiously, both acutely aware of the importance of ensuring the children felt secure and comfortable with Greg stepping into the role of their father. Their primary focus was on the well-being of Andy, Amara, and Ashton. When the children finally gave their blessing, Allison and Greg tied the knot in a simple yet heartfelt ceremony, solidifying their new family bond. 12 years passed, bringing with them both triumphs and challenges. Despite the deep scars Adam had left on Allison's heart, she and Greg flourished in their careers and, together, raised 3 remarkable children. Life seemed to have settled into a peaceful rhythm, their family thriving in the love and stability Greg had helped create. But the tranquility was shattered one ordinary afternoon when Allison received an unexpected call from her secretary. "Mrs. Lawson, there's a package here that needs your signature," the secretary informed her, the urgency in her voice barely masked. Allison, engrossed in her work, barely had time to process the message before she hurried out of her office. But as she approached the reception area, her heart stopped. "Adam?" she gasped, her breath catching in her throat at the sight of her ex-husband standing before her. Shock and a flood of emotions coursed through her as she struggled to comprehend the man who had walked out of her life over a decade ago, now appearing in the very place where she had built her new life. Without a word, she led him into her office, her mind reeling as she sought the answers to questions that had haunted her for years. Adam followed her nervously, his eyes darting around the spacious office, its elegant blue decor reflecting the success and strength Allison had achieved in his absence. He had never expected to see her like this, confident, powerful, transformed. Once they were inside, Allison closed the door behind them, the weight of the moment settling heavily on her shoulders. She took a seat in her swivel chair, her eyes locking onto Adam's as she gathered her thoughts. "I've rehearsed this conversation a million times in front of the mirror," she began, her voice steady, though it trembled with the intensity of long-buried pain. Adam was at a loss for words, stunned by the woman before him, a woman so different from the one he had left behind. "I used to miss you, you know," Allison continued, her gaze never wavering. "I even held on to the hope that you might change your mind, that you'd come back and make things right. But then, as time passed and the truth of what you did settled in, I began to hate you, more than I ever loved you. That hate drove me to succeed, to become the person you see before you today." Adam stood there, speechless, as the full weight of her words sank in. The realization of what he had lost, and what she had become in his absence, hit him like a ton of bricks. "I wanted you to see my success," Allison added, a faint, bitter smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Isn't it ironic that we find ourselves here today, in this place, after all these years?" The tension in the room was palpable, a swirl of emotions neither of them could fully grasp. Adam, who had once been the center of Allison's world, now found himself on the outside, looking in at a life that had moved on without him. For Allison, this moment was both a reckoning and a release, a chance to confront the ghost of her past and finally close the door on the pain that had once consumed her. "I have nothing to say now, but I do have one question. How could you do this to me, Adam?" Allison's voice trembled with a mix of anger and deep-seated hurt as she confronted the man who had shattered her life. Adam shifted uncomfortably, searching for the right words to defend himself. "It's not entirely my fault, Allison. I know what I did was wrong, but I felt trapped," he began, his voice wavering. "I was young and scared. Everything happened so fast. Our relationship, marriage, the kids. I wasn't ready to be a father to 3 little ones. I felt suffocated." "That's absurd," Allison shouted, her frustration boiling over. "You were 27, Adam, not some naive teenager. You were old enough to take responsibility for all of it. Or do you need me to remind you exactly what you did?" Adam's brow furrowed in confusion. "What did I do?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. Allison's fury intensified, her voice seething with contempt. "Have you forgotten the bet you made with Sam about me?" she spat. "You pursued me, pretended to love me, faked a happy marriage, acted thrilled about becoming a father. All lies. And when it all became too much for you, you ran away, leaving me alone to raise our triplets." Adam was stunned into silence. He had expected Allison to be angry, to resent him for abandoning her and their children. But her knowledge of the bet, his affairs, and his cowardice left him reeling. "How do you know all this? The bet, the affairs, everything? Who told you?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Allison's expression was unyielding. "Greg told me everything after you left," she replied coldly. "He stepped in where you failed, Adam. He supported me and the children, helped us survive, and did everything you should have done." Adam's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, you and Greg are married?" he asked, the realization dawning on him. Allison's silence confirmed it, and Adam's shock quickly morphed into something more calculating. A twisted idea began to take root in his mind. This could be his golden opportunity to leverage Greg for money. After all, it had been Greg, not Sam, with whom Adam had originally made the bet about Allison. "You kept that from her, didn't you, Greg?" Adam thought, his mind racing with the possibilities. "Maybe it's time I pay Greg a visit and spill the whole truth." Adam's demeanor shifted as he stepped closer to Allison, his tone dripping with bitterness. "Allison, you should consider yourself lucky that I left," he sneered. "Look at me. I'm nothing now. I've got a miserable job, drowning in debt. If I'd known you were this rich, I would have come back sooner, asking for your help." Allison's anger flared again, her disgust evident. "You're drunk, Adam," she snapped, her voice laced with contempt. "And even in your pathetic state, you still dare to try and manipulate me. I'm not surprised." Desperation began to seep into Adam's voice as he realized his plan wasn't working as he'd hoped. "Allison, please," he begged, his bravado crumbling. "I need money. I'm drowning here." Allison's eyes hardened, her resolve steeled by years of surviving without him. "You've made your choices, Adam," she replied, her voice cold and resolute. "And you'll have to live with them. There's nothing left here for you. Not me, not the children, and certainly not the money you're so desperate for." Adam's shoulders slumped, defeated. The man who had once walked out on his family now stood before Allison, a broken shadow of his former self. As she watched him, Allison knew that this confrontation, painful as it was, had given her the closure she needed. She was no longer the woman he had left behind. She was stronger, wiser, and fully in control of her own life. And there was no room in that life for Adam. "Help you? Why would I?" Allison's voice shook with anger, her eyes blazing with the fury of years of abandonment and betrayal. "You abandoned the kids and me without a second thought. Did you ever consider us? Why should I help you now? You can leave. I never want to see you again, and don't you dare cross my path again. Go." Her voice cracked as she pointed to the door, her resolve unwavering. Adam was left stunned by the force of her words. He had underestimated the depth of the wounds he had inflicted. Stumbling back, he mumbled something incoherent before turning and walking out of her office. The door slammed behind him, a final punctuation to a conversation long overdue. Greg never imagined this day would come when Adam would resurface after so many years. He waited anxiously in a nearby cafe, planning to talk to Allison after her workday. But as he sipped his coffee, he noticed Adam lurking outside their home. His heart sank as he watched Adam smile maliciously, watching Allison and Greg embrace at their front door. Even worse, Adam's gaze drifted to the children, Andy, Amara, and Ashton, playing innocently in the yard. The following day, while Allison was at work, Adam returned, this time emboldened by his twisted resolve. He knocked on the door, and Greg, surprised to see him, answered cautiously. "Adam, my God, what are you doing here?" Greg asked, shock evident in his voice. But before he could react, Adam pushed his way into the house, settling onto the couch as if he belonged there. "Adam, how did you find us?" Greg asked, his voice laced with concern as he shut the door behind them. Adam leaned back, a smug grin spreading across his face. "My best friend seducing my wife behind my back. Impressive," he said sarcastically, ignoring Greg's growing discomfort. He glanced around the living room, taking in the opulence that surrounded him. "You've done well for yourself, Greg." "Adam, what do you want? Why are you here?" Greg demanded, his patience wearing thin. "How could you do this to Allison, to your children?" "You knew I loved her," Adam said, his tone suddenly serious. "Why did you love her? If you did, you wouldn't have run away and left her and the kids," Greg countered, his voice tight with anger. Adam's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening. "Have you forgotten the bet we made that night at the cafe?" he asked, his voice dripping with bitterness. "I fell in love with her at first sight, just like you did. We both wanted her, right? But only one of us won, and that was me." Greg felt a chill run down his spine as Adam continued, the twisted pride in his voice unmistakable. "I admit, I was happy with her. Then she got pregnant, and I was overjoyed, even though I wasn't fully prepared. But when I saw those 3 babies, I panicked. I had only prepared for 1. 3 was too much for me to handle, so I left. I wasn't ready to raise triplets." Greg stared at Adam in disbelief, unable to comprehend the depth of his selfishness. "You walked away from your own family because you weren't ready? Because you couldn't handle the responsibility?" Greg's voice was low, filled with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Adam shrugged, his indifference infuriating. "I did what I had to do, but now I see how well you've taken care of things. Maybe it's time I get something in return for all the trouble I went through." Greg's eyes narrowed as he realized Adam's true intentions. "You're here to blackmail me, aren't you? You think you can threaten me with the past to get money?" Adam smirked, his eyes gleaming with a sinister satisfaction. "Let's just say I believe in getting what's owed to me, and I think you owe me, Greg. After all, you got the life I walked away from." Greg took a deep breath, his mind racing as he weighed his options. He couldn't let Adam ruin everything he had built with Allison and the children. But he also knew that giving in to Adam's demands would only give him more power over their lives. "You're not getting a cent from me, Adam," Greg finally said, his voice steady. "I won't let you use the past to destroy our future." Adam's smirk faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "We'll see about that," he said, standing up and heading for the door. "This isn't over, Greg. Not by a long shot." As the door closed behind him, Greg felt a wave of dread wash over him. He knew Adam wouldn't give up easily, and he had to find a way to protect his family from the man who had once walked away from them, but now seemed determined to drag them back into his chaos. Greg frowned as Adam spoke, his expression hardening with each word. "People don't run away from their family or their children," Greg stated firmly, disgusted by Adam's lack of remorse. But Adam simply shrugged, dismissing Greg's concern with a wave of his hand before making a shocking demand. "I don't want to go into details. I want $50,000, Adam said, his tone casual, as if he were asking for nothing more than a small favor. Greg was stunned, struggling to comprehend the audacity of the request. "Yes, I'm only asking for a little to keep my mouth shut. It will help me with some personal matters and pay off my debts. And in return, you can save your marriage with Allison. Imagine the consequences if she finds out that you and I made a bet about her," Adam explained, his voice dripping with calculated manipulation. Greg's mind raced as he processed the threat. After a moment of tense reflection, he reluctantly agreed. "But I need some time," he said, his voice strained. "That's fine. I'll see you soon. Remember, Saturday is the deadline?" Adam replied, giving Greg a condescending pat on the shoulder before walking out, leaving a trail of dread in his wake. On Friday afternoon, Greg withdrew $50,000 from the joint account he shared with Allison, hoping she wouldn't notice. But his hopes were dashed when Allison received a notification on her phone. A debit of $50,000? Why would Greg need such a large sum of money? She wondered, a wave of concern washing over her. Without hesitation, she called Greg to confront him. "Hey, don't worry. After all, it's our money," Greg began, trying to sound reassuring. "But why didn't you tell me you needed $50,000? Is everything okay? Did something unexpected happen?" Allison's voice was laced with worry. Greg knew he had no choice but to come clean. "Adam threatened to tell you that he made a bet with me, not Sam. I was terrified of losing you, Allison. I love you deeply, and I can't imagine my life without you and the kids." To Greg's astonishment, Allison burst into laughter. He had braced himself for an explosion of anger, but her unexpected reaction left him speechless. "Greg, how absurd. Do you think I'd leave you over a drunken joke that came back to haunt us?" she said, smiling warmly. "I despise Adam, not because of the bet or his foolish actions, but for abandoning me with the triplets. All of that is in the past. When I get home, we'll talk more," she said, ending the call with a note of reassurance. Greg was still in shock when Allison returned home. He immediately apologized, his voice trembling with sincerity, but Allison quickly reassured him. "Greg, it's okay. I've already forgiven you. What matters is that we move forward and focus on our happiness," she said, her words filled with the calm certainty of someone who had long since put the past behind her. "Let me prepare something to eat," Allison said, heading to the kitchen with a sense of resolve. As she chopped vegetables, her thoughts turned to Adam. She might have felt pity for the broken man he had become, but his attempt at blackmail had crossed a line. The more she thought about it, the more determined she became. "Greg," she called out as she prepared the meal, "we can't let Adam get away with this. What he's done isn't just wrong. It's criminal." Greg, who had been silently processing everything, looked up at her. "You're right," he agreed, nodding. "We need to do something about it." Together, they meticulously gathered all the necessary evidence. They documented Adam's threats, his extortion attempt, and his long history of evading child support payments. Armed with a strong case, they decided to take action, knowing that they couldn't allow Adam's malicious behavior to go unpunished. The following day, they presented their findings to the local law enforcement agency. Allison and Greg knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were resolute in their decision. They wanted justice, not just for themselves, but for their children, who deserved better than the chaos Adam had brought into their lives. As they walked out of the police station, hand in hand, Allison felt a sense of closure wash over her. She had faced the man who had once caused her so much pain and had emerged stronger, ready to protect her family from any further harm. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace, knowing that they had done the right thing. The authorities, impressed by the meticulousness of Allison and Greg's investigation and the solid evidence they had gathered, swiftly initiated an official inquiry into Adam's actions. It didn't take long for the full extent of Adam's despicable behavior to be uncovered, laying bare his malicious intent for all to see. The investigation was thorough, and law enforcement agencies wasted no time in building an airtight case against him. The weight of his transgressions was overwhelming, and soon Adam found himself facing the harsh reality of his deeds. He was quickly arrested and charged with blackmailing Greg and evading child support payments for over a decade. The news of Adam's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. People who had once known him were stunned by the magnitude of his deceit and the deep pain he had inflicted on Allison and her family. The legal proceedings were conducted with the utmost seriousness, as the authorities were determined to ensure justice was served. Adam's trial became a significant event, drawing widespread attention from the media and the public alike. The evidence presented in court was damning, painting a clear and devastating picture of his character. Witness testimonies further solidified the case, exposing the depth of Adam's manipulation and his callous disregard for the well-being of others. In the courtroom, the facade of arrogance that Adam had worn for so long finally crumbled under the weight of his crimes. The judge, recognizing the severity of his offenses, delivered a fair and substantial sentence, ensuring that Adam was held accountable for his actions. The verdict sent a powerful message, reinforcing the principle that those who seek to exploit and harm others will face the full force of the law. With Adam behind bars, Allison and Greg felt a profound sense of relief and closure. Their courageous decision to pursue justice had not only protected their own family but had also potentially saved others from falling victim to Adam's malicious schemes. They took comfort in knowing that their actions might serve as a deterrent, preventing similar acts of blackmail and safeguarding the well-being of innocent people in the future. As they moved forward with their lives, Allison and Greg found solace in the strength of their love and the resilience they had shown in the face of adversity. The trials they had endured together only served to strengthen their bond, reinforcing their commitment to one another and their determination to face any challenges that might come their way. United by their shared experience, they looked toward the future with renewed hope, secure in the knowledge that their love had triumphed over the darkness of their past. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of resilience, justice, and the power of love. We've seen how Allison and Greg faced incredible challenges, from betrayal and abandonment to blackmail and legal battles, yet they emerged stronger together. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from their story? What is one lesson or takeaway that you will apply in your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave your comment below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching.